The final question for this week comes from Steven. This is actually following up on something he had talked about last week, where he says, Nate, do you do ear training? Absolutely. Ear training for me is probably the single most important skill to develop. I mentioned in a previous video that for me, the sounds and the emotions of music come first, and the language and the theory comes later. So starting with really good ear training is kind of the foundation of everything you're going to do as far as really absorbing the concepts of music theory and becoming a better player. As far as categories of ear training, okay, we can deal with rhythmic ear training as far as recognizing beat and pulse and time. We can deal with harmonic or chord-based ear training, which is either going to be vertical ear training with recognizing sonorities and chord families and chord types, or we can do a horizontal harmony ear training, which is recognizing chord progressions and chord relationships. When it comes to melody, one of the first types of melodic ear training is just recognizing the relationship between any given note and the chord underneath it. If you hear a chord and you hear a note on top of it, what is that vertical relationship? Also, melody has horizontal melodic relationships. I often call that melodic contour, which is how the notes move from one to the next in a melody. So one of the exercises I do all the time, and it's actually based on something that, guitar players tend to forget about this. One of the best ways to really develop a strong ear is to use your voice, because your ears plus your voice will direct your hands about what to do. And your ears are always going to be faster than your fingers sometimes as far as recognizing sound. A lot of times the distance from hearing to performing can feel like 1,000 miles. We want to reduce that distance, or how long it takes to hear something, and then immediately be able to execute it. And a huge part of ear training is the concept of audiation. It's hearing the musical sound that you're trying to create on the instrument. It's hearing that sound in your head. Okay, if I said to somebody, close your eyes and picture an elephant, that's visualization. But what if I said, okay, here's an E major chord. Can you hear internally the third of that chord, the fifth of that chord, the seventh of that chord? That's audiation, being able to hear musically in your head. So here is one of the exercises that I do all of the time. It's based on using what is called a drone chord. And what is a drone chord? It is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chord that just sits there. Okay? I just sat down at the keyboard, recorded a chord for a couple minutes, and it just sits there. There's no beat, there's no timing, there's no nothing. A drone chord just establishes a tonality. Here's what I want to do as far as ear training and vocalization. A lot of times what I call vocalize to internalize. Sing it so that you can really absorb the emotion and the sound associated with it. As you're listening to a drone chord, okay, try to focus on one note in your inner ear that is inside of this chord, and then sing it. Okay, so you listen to the chord, you try to focus on the sound of one consonant note in that chord. Maybe, and you try to sing that note along with the chord. You don't have to be a great singer. You just want to try to, once again, deliver the sound of the note that you're hearing. All right? It doesn't matter what that note is. You're just trying to sing a note that is in tune with the chord. Once again. Then I want to find that note on my guitar. Okay? Once I can audiate a single note that is in tune with the chord, I want to audiate what is the next lower note from there. In other words, if I hear the chord and I can hear in my ear, what would be the next lower pitch note that also fits this chord? And then play that. Or what's the next higher note in the chord? All right, so can I hear in my head, if I'm going to go up in pitch, what's the next note I want to hit? Now, it doesn't matter the names of these notes. It doesn't matter what intervals they are. This is just hearing and then delivering. Because if I can hear and vocalize a specific sound, and I do this a lot, my fingers are going to start to make these connections between where notes are on my fretboard much, much faster. Now, the challenging thing, of course, is what happens if I want to audiate a note that is not actually in the chord? What if I want to audiate and then play a dissonant function instead of a instead of a consonant function note? Can I audiate a tension note? Or and then can I start to put those together? I talk about the importance of being able to vocalize and connect your emotions to certain sounds before you put it on the instrument, because this is the secret to learning theory. The story I always tell about this is I had a student years ago who was really into Carlos Santana, and he was learning a bunch of licks and phrases from Santana songs, and he comes into his lesson and says, yeah, I really like Santana's phrasing. He uses a lot of the Dorian mode. And I said, oh, you like Dorian? He's like, yeah, man, Dorian's super cool. And I was like, cool, sing it to me. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, what? I was like, if you love Dorian so much, sing it to me. All right? I was like, I hope you don't think that Dorian is just some finger pattern that you memorize. That's not what Dorian is. Dorian is a sound. Dorian is a feeling. Every scale and mode is like this. If you can't sing the proper intervals and connect your voice to your hands, you're never really going to understand the full potential of a scale. This is one of a gazillion exercises I have for ear training, but start by using this whole framework of vocalize to internalize, because you will find that everything you do becomes much more ingrained in you if you can sing it first. All right? If you can get your ears and your voice connected to what you're hearing and then teach your hands how to do what your voice is doing, you're going to get much, much faster results. So I hope that helps.